The Diary of Constance is the true story behind the crash of Pan American Flight 202, also known as the Clipper Good Hope. What makes this story really personal to me is my grandfather was the captain of that plane. The layers of plot that apply to the story are kind of the initial crash, and then going deeper into the subsequent search for the plane and kind of the bespoke conspiracy theories around the plane crash, and then finally the bottom piece, which deals with my grandmother Constance and how she dealt with the loss of her husband. The Diary of Constance was built to be episodic, so this first episode is a lot about the facts. We're going to move into the second piece, which will talk more about the different people involved and a couple of the theories around the plane crash, and then finally just coming to terms with what happened. The day of her funeral, I was sitting at a table at the reception, and there was this video playing against the screen. This is something that I had never seen before. I just sat there, mouth agape, and just realized, unfortunately, that this was maybe somebody that I didn't know. Initially, I wrote as a form of kind of therapy. I never meant for this to be a short or be a movie. It was just something that I did after a funeral because I just didn't want to talk about my feelings. And I wrote for a while, and then I kind of realized that there was no basis, there was no research, there was no education behind what I was writing about. So I just put that aside, I stopped writing, and I just started researching. It's been a 2-year process of researching, writing, revising. One of the key things that I wanted to incorporate was licensed information or licensed content, and the Joseph McCarthy hearings were a huge piece to what was going on around communism within the early 50s up into 1954. So licensing that content was a huge part of making this documentary style narrative. I decided to go through my aunt's basement to look at my grandmother's old belongings. I found these amazing 8mm reels. I had no idea what was on them. And then the 35mm slides, they're just hundreds and hundreds of slides. And so I went to a group over in Greenpoint, Brooklyn called Digify, and they did an amazing job taking that footage and digitizing it for me. So as I'm going through and I'm looking at it, there was something that just didn't feel right, and I felt that I was doing the footage a disservice. So I took a step back and I got on eBay and I started looking for 8mm reels. I started looking for 35mm slide carousels, and I got all this stuff, and that's why we kind of framed everything around seeing the 8mm reels and seeing the 35mm slides, because I wanted people to experience what I experienced the first time I clicked that button and that slide turned around, or I learned how to load the 8mm reel, which took about 10 to 15 minutes, and I was so afraid that I was gonna burn one of these reels. And to see them against a wall versus seeing them on your digital screen, it just feels different. Andrew and I have worked on several projects together, and we have a little bit of an unorthodox process. What I typically like to do is get as many shots in the camera as possible. So just using a point and shoot, I'm able to start getting the story together, and then I kind of pass over the story, and then Andrew does his magic.
So I brought my complement of equipment, which begins with the camera, the Canon C300. Got a great versatility. We can do documentary style, which kind of fits with this a little bit, and also fits in perfectly on a film set, and that's kind of what this is. We had some setup shots. We could take some time and do some nice lighting. We also had stuff that's kind of just reaction things. We also used a Canon 5D Mark II, Canon 7D as some second angle cameras. But the real key to this was the lighting. We had to give this a certain feel. It started with, as you see over my shoulder, some of the Edison bulbs. We used them as the lights for when we shot the diary and Dan flipping through it. That was all practical lighting. We also have a Kino 2'4" bank that we use to help light the big corkboard along with the light panel. One of the big themes in this piece is the search for truth. We were looking at the corkboard and we're looking at all the articles on there, and we were wondering, how can we make this how can we bring these out and make you feel like you're searching for stuff? And we thought about, the guys in the jungle taking spotlights and flashlights and looking all around for the wreckage. So we tried to do something similar. We took the light panel one by one, framed the camera on whatever article we wanted, just take the panel and rotate it across, and it kind of gave this feeling of a searchlight looking for stuff. And our hope was that it would just bring you in more and convey that feeling of what is real, what's the truth, and how are we gonna find it. And on top of all that, you can have great visuals all you want, but if you don't have great audio to match it, then there's no story. And this needed to be textured, this needed to have a feeling. And so, we had a few different Rode microphones. We had to get great sound of the slide projector, the old film projector going tuk 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 tuk. And without any of that, you don't have the texture that this film needs, and it would have fallen flat.
So the Diary of Constance, I had a vision in my head and nobody sold it. And so I reached out to somebody on Etsy. I was like, can you build me this thing? And I want a leather bound diary with like a little bit of stuff here and then Diary of Constance at the top. And I met someone and she created it, and that's what you see. And I really wanted it to just evoke what we're trying to do, and that's just kind of a personal story. So a friend of mine actually does really good illustrations, and those are the illustrations that you're actually seeing in the Diary of Constance. I didn't do them myself because I have the artistic ability of a 4-year-old child. And then you look at a lot of the articles, which I spent months and months and months gathering. Those are not original articles. Those are actually articles that I printed out from the internet and then used a system of taking coffee and putting them in the oven and aging them so they look similar to some of the old articles. The corkboard, it's theatrical, but at the same time, it was something that I actually have been using. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of show the web of the crash in the middle, and then all of the people and the stories that were associated with that.
So one of the biggest challenges of this whole film was the fact that basically the 100% of it took place in Dan's studio apartment here on the Upper West Side of New York City. New York City apartments are not known for their expansive square footage. And we came in with 3 or 4 lights, slider, tripod. We were filling the place up fast and didn't have a lot of space to begin with. So one of the biggest challenges was always just kind of moving around, trying not to knock stuff over, squeezing lights into weird places, squeezing the camera in where we could. That's where the Canon C300, along with the wide-angle lenses, and we're able to make the most of a very small space. After we wrapped up principal photography on this project, I handed all the footage off to Dan, and he started doing a rough cut in Final Cut X, and which made my life much easier when we started to do the final edit over in Premiere. We figured out how to migrate from Final Cut X to Premiere, and then we brought in and started doing audio sweetening. We did some color correction that was necessary. We also just tightened up the whole piece and basically brought it to where you see today.
It was always very important to me to tell a true story. At one point, I wanted to diverge into something that was a little bit more 80% true, 20% imagination. And I finally came to the realization that you can make some theories, but everything needs to be based in truth. It needs to be 100% true, and that's what the story is. And really, it is coming to terms with the loss of a loved one. And whether the crash had happened or not, it's still about the stories, it's still about the memories, and it's the ability to have the memories of your loved ones live on.